India became the first country to land on the south pole of the moon, and that is also the fourth country, after the US, China, and former Soviet Union, to have successfully landed on the moon's surface. As of last evening, that is August 29 evening, we have a new fact to be proud of. Pragyan discovered oxygen among other elements in Moon's south polar region. What were the other elements discovered by the rover? So those were aluminum, calcium, iron, chromium, titanium, manganese, and silicon. So to talk more on this, I am joined by Dr. TV Venkateswaran, a distinguished senior scientist in Vigyan Prasar in New Delhi. Sir, thank you for joining this live show. My first question to you is, the ISRO's announcement actually, mentions the presence of various elements, like I just mentioned, calcium, aluminium, iron. So how do these findings actually contribute to our understanding of the moon's composition and its geological history?
Yeah. So, number one, the number of elements were discovered by one of the instrument which was carried in Pragyan, which can detect only elements, not the molecules. That is a key point that we need to understand. So, which means that suppose if there is H2O, that is water, that instrument will say that there is hydrogen, there is oxygen, but it won't tell you how they are combined, whether they are combined, not combined. Even now, if you look at the list of elements that they have found iron and then also sulfur and also oxygen. So for all you know, it can be in the form of ferric oxide, iron oxide, right? So it's not sure that it is in the elemental form. Okay, so that is oxygen is not there as separate. But however, if you find some of these elements in the soil in substantial quantity, perhaps you can also find ways of extracting it and then using it in a way that you want in future. If there is a lunar base or something like that, perhaps you'll be able to use them for, producing oxygen or things of that kind.
Okay, so now let's come to the discovery of oxygen. Now, actually, viewers, many of you may think there have been several other successful moon missions before Chandrayaan 3. Did no one actually confirm this? Well, over decades of exploration and research, the discovery of water on moon has unfolded through a series of significant milestones. I mean, seriously, a series of significant milestones. So water molecules consist of oxygen atoms, but they are not in the form of molecular oxygen. So lunar soil known as regolith also contains oxygen in compounds such as, just like doctor said, oxides. But this oxygen is not in, in the molecular form we typically associate with the breathable air. So Dr. TDV, my question is, please share more details about the presence of oxygen on the lunar surface. Like, how significant is this finding in the context of lunar exploration and future missions?
So, but actually discovery of oxygen on lunar surface is not new. It's known. So that's not the key point. That's not some kind of a surprise. Even on Earth, for example, if you look at the Earth's crust, meaning that sand that you can, take from under your feet, okay, about 47% is oxygen. But they are in various forms of oxide. Oxygen is a very reactive element. Okay, so it can combine with various other elements and form various kinds of substance. For example, with silicon, it can form silicon oxide and so on and so forth. So about 47% of Earth's sand, soil, is also oxygen. Even from Apollo missions and Soviet mission, which brought soil from moon, we know that roughly about 40% of that is oxygen. So presence of oxygen is not a big surprise. Presence of oxygen is not a big surprise.
Okay. So again, sir, to the second part of my question. So how does, how significant is this finding in the context of lunar exploration?
This study of trying to find elemental composition from the surface of the moon actually is to find some ground truth. You have got some basically remote sensing data from various orbiters. So you want to find out whether that kind of elements are actually present on the ground. So it's basically this study by rover. I don't think is going to throw big surprises with regard to material that we are going to find, but it will be corroborating the remote sensing data that that has been collected by various orbiters, including Indian orbiters and American orbiters and Japanese orbiter in the recent past.
Okay, you said that the finding oxygen is not that significant. Let me ask you, sir. Historically, the quest for lunar exploration has always been associated with the possibility of human habitation. So, with the presence of oxygen on where rover has actually found, could there be any implications for future lunar exploration,
Yeah.
particularly in terms of supporting human habitation there?
See, if we find water in any form, that would be much better than finding oxygen associated with other elements. Okay, so dissociating water and taking oxygen is much easier compared to, for example, separating oxygen from, let's say, iron oxide or things of that kind. Okay,
Oh.
so it will be a energy drawn process. But however, if push come to shove, then you can use this material to draw whatever element that you want. That is not impossibility, but I don't think that is going to be the major focus. The significance of some of the elements, like say for example sulfur. Sulfur is something that people have been talking quite a lot. Even ISRO kind of put it as their first sensor. We found sulfur. The presence of sulfur, again, people have been speculating because of the remote sensing data. But this is the first time that you have a proof from the ground.
Yeah.
And the presence of sulfur, particularly in the southern polar region, indicates that perhaps Moon had a very active volcanic phase in its life. So sulfur is usually associated, sulfur on the surface is usually associated with volcanic emissions. Okay,
Yes.
we do know that there have been volcanoes on the moon and lava from that moon. We can find those features. Now you find sulfur in substantial quantity. So something about the moon's early history, the volcanic past, one can infer from sulfur. That is why one is so gaga about sulfur. Okay, and if you look from a futuristic point of view, if you want to do some kind of farming on lunar soil, of course, you need to do a lot more. I mean, lot more controlled activity you need to do. You'll need organic carbon, not just carbon, but you need organic carbon and things like that in the soil. But however, the presence of sulfur helps.
Okay,
Presence of
sir.
sulfur helps in growth of plant. So that's why one reason one can look at it future. With
Okay.
regard to hydrogen, which the ISRO is trying to
So
search.
before we actually go to hydrogen, let's talk about this for a while. Understanding the origin of elements on the moon has actually been a topic of scientific curiosity for several decades.
Yeah.
So is there any indication of how these elements might have originated on the moon? Like, you just told about sulfur, how there could have been volcanic eruptions. So could you explain the potential sources of the other elements listed by the ISRO? Yeah.
Not all elements necessarily have to be having that kind of origin. Only a certain element on the surface are kind of a telltale signature. Okay, like for example, iron on the surface is not a big surprise because we are a rocky planet. So rocky planets will have a substantial quantity of iron. If, for example, we are able to measure the relative abundance of three types of isotopes. For example, the oxygen isotope. Oxygen comes in three isotopes, 16, 17, and 18. So if you look at the proportion of 16 to 18, the proportion varies with the distance from sun. So if you are very near to sun, the proportion of oxygen 18 is greater. And as you move away from sun, the proportion of oxygen 18 is very less. Like say, for example, some of the objects which originated at the edge of solar system, like for example, some comets and so on, they don't have much oxygen. It's a very, very simple stuff. I mean, heavier element tend to combine, tend to congregate near the source, right? So actually the solar system formed when there was a huge gas cloud which was rotating about itself. The center became sun. So which means the heavier elements will go towards the center. Okay. So that's how rocky planets are near the sun. So if we find the proportions of oxygen 16, 17, 18 on moon and compare it with Earth, we can come to various conclusions. If they kind of match, then it means that the moon and Earth was formed at the same place. They were born in the same hospital, perhaps in the same ward. Perhaps they were born together. So maybe they are siblings. Okay. But suppose if the oxygen 18 is more compared to Earth, then moon was born very near to somewhere Mercury or even closer to sun, and it has migrated and come to Earth. Or if 18 was low, then it should have born much further away. So it's been that the moon is something like fallen in love with Earth and then moved to Earth. Okay. Yeah.
That's a beautiful way to
Yeah.
put it. So
So
now
alternatively, these are all some ideas that we can make from understanding the composition in more detail. What the data that we have is only a preliminary data. You need much more detailed information to analyze these kinds of stuff.
so a basic conception of moon to what it is now. Yeah. Okay. So now let's talk about hydrogen. So actually, hydrogen has been a subject of interest in lunar exploration due to its potential as a clean energy source. So its presence on the moon has been speculated for years, and the search for it has also been very, a notable milestone. So if hydrogen is indeed found, it could revolutionize space exploration, offering a sustainable energy supply for various activities, from powering equipment to facilitating even life support, if I'm not wrong. So other than this, what are the potential implications of hydrogen, if hydrogen is detected, and what is the ongoing investigation, regarding the presence of hydrogen on the moon?
Okay. See, if you look at Chandrayaan-1, India's first orbiter, it carried an instrument called SARA. It's basically atom reflecting analyzer. So what it was doing was it is looking at the atoms which were coming from the moon. Okay. So let's say my hand is the moon and the sunlight falls, and then that kicks up some atoms, and then those atoms are coming up. So this analyzer was examining it. It found hydrogen in the reflected atoms coming from moon. It found hydrogen, which was a big surprise. Basically, what it told was that the protons which were coming from sun as part of solar wind was interacting with the moon surface and capturing a electron and was becoming a hydrogen, and that's what coming up. So they estimated that something like 1 in 5 of protons which is hitting the moon surface was coming back as hydrogen. So which means there are 4 which are remaining in the soil, right? So it's not necessary that all the 4 protons will become hydrogen, but one would expect some of them will become hydrogen and stay within the lunar soil. That's what this study is expecting to find. If they find, then they will also have a connection to the 2008 Chandrayaan-1 analysis. Okay, this will also mean very important things. Number one, there is a huge, let's say, expectation that you can harvest this hydrogen, that the hydrogen which is getting produced on the surface, you can harvest it. And if you harvest it, then it means that it's a huge fuel resource. Okay, so and it is replenishable. It's not, it won't get exhausted because it's being constantly produced on the surface of moon. It will be like a renewable source. So the hydrogen that you can harvest on moon will be a renewable energy.
Okay. So moving forward, as we look ahead, the program's trajectory could actually encompass new, missions designed to delve deeper into the moon's mysteries. So What's next for the Chandrayaan-3 mission and its research objectives? Are there any upcoming, phases or missions that build on these discoveries?
Basically, we are now in the mid of the lunar day. The lunar day lasts for about 14 days. So from the landing, now we are in the midpoint, roughly. So there is roughly the same time that is available. The ISRO is expecting that they'll be able to move the rover about 300 meters to about 400 meters, which also means that it'll be able to collect samples from multiple places. That's first foremost scientific objective. Because by collecting multiple samples from the ground and then getting data from different points, our corroboration of the remote sensing data will become much more stronger. That is one of the biggest aim. Plus, by finding some of these kinds of material like sulfur, hydrogen, and so on, you will also be able to test some of the other hypotheses that we have about moon and moon surface. This is where it is. And then the lander, the instruments are working very well. So they'll be collecting this data of temperature at different levels on different times of the day, lunar day, I mean. So from that collection, you will be able to see that how this changes. But from the first look at the temperature, one can say that the lunar soil is a very good insulator, heat insulator. So which means that even if I get some, let's say, solid ice, I can create a bunker using the lunar soil, and then the solid ice will remain as solid ice. It won't get melted, even
Uh,
during midday.
Now that you spoke about temperature, Doctor, why was the temperature? It was a surprise to the ISRO scientists that we read on newspapers. So, can you please explain on why this came as an
Uh,
unexpected news?
it's not actually, again, if you compare to the data collected by other landers earlier, it's not such a surprise. So we know that if you go into the regolith, the temperature variations are substantial. But what we found was that the surface temperature was about 60, 70, whereas one was expecting somewhere around 50.
Okay.
That was a bit of a surprise. Okay, we thought that given that latitude, the angle of the sun, and so on, the temperature would be one thing. I mean, it is slightly another. But this temperature is essentially because of the reflection. That is, land reflects back thermal energy, and that's what you are measuring. So, further studies would be required for understanding. But as we go deeper into the lunar soil, the temperature variation was known. It was not unknown.
All right. So, last question. Considering the global attention and excitement generated by these findings, how do you think they will impact future discussions and plans for space exploration? And how do you think they will impact future discussions for and plans, for space exploration?
See, this Chandrayaan 3 mission has had three objectives. One is to safely land, second is to move the rover, and third, use all the instruments to do scientific studies on moon. Now, what we are seeing is that all the three objectives are going to be very successfully completed. That's what we are going to see. The most important takeaway from this would be that we'll be building on our landing mechanism. We'll be building on the rover moving mechanism uh, because the long-term aim of all this mission, there is one, of course, the scientific study, like how moon evolved, what happened to the moon, where was the moon born, okay, origin of the moon, and so on and so forth. A lot of very exciting, interesting mysteries are there. In addition to the science, there is also the space economy. That is, can you harvest, for example, rare materials like helium-3 from moon? Which is also replenishable, meaning that it's constantly produced on the surface of the moon. Okay, such questions are there. So if one is looking at the second part, that is the space economy, then one would require a fleet of craft which will land, move about, collect, pack it up, and then come back to Earth. So you need a automated system for it. So the technology that we are building will be, you know, aimed at that in futuristic sense. If
Thank you for your inputs, Dr. Viewers. I'm sure this live interview would have been definitely very, very informative. Do follow us for more such interesting updates.